We're in Oklahoma City with landscape designer John Fluitt, co-owner of Garden Design Associates. Thanks for joining me today, John.
Thanks, Kim. Glad to be here.
Can you tell me a little bit about your business?
Well, I've been doing landscape design for about 25 years, and we do mostly residential work. We do a little bit of commercial work, and we work all over Oklahoma City. Seem to do a lot of work in the historical areas of town, as well as the northwest part of town, and we like what we do. We have a lot of fun doing it.
Okay. Now, as we've looked at a few landscapes together, I get this idea that a lot of landscape design and garden work is problem solving.
Oh, definitely, yeah. It's oftentimes when we're brought into a design, there are problems existing. There's existing plant material for one thing, oftentimes on an existing older home, and so you're working through what's there, you're analyzing the site to see what it needs. Maybe there's wind problems, maybe there's heat, maybe you need a place for shelter. So we're looking at everything, all the components, and trying to solve problems such as drainage, maybe irrigation, perhaps they have pets or children those aren't problems, but we're trying to work with it so that our design reflects what the owner needs and tries to achieve what they're after. So.
Okay, well, we're going to meet with several members of your team, but before we get started, let's look at one of those creative solutions on this property.
Sounds good.
Well, in this area, I think the first thing I notice is that your beds are not in their traditional location, they're away from the house. Can you just tell me a bit about why this was designed in this way?
Well, on this particular 50s style home built in this old historic neighborhood, it has these large overhangs. And when we came in on the project, the foundation plantings were overgrown, and they were actually reaching out for light. They were stretching out away from the foundation. Plus, many of the plants had overgrown their space and were actually blocking some of the details on this low-slung style of home.
Okay.
So we felt like this was the perfect opportunity to create a walking space. Perhaps even in a light rain, you could be protected by this overhang and pull the plants out away from the house where they're actually visible from indoors looking out the windows.
Oh, sure.
And still pretty and curb appeal from the street. So we use this Aztec gravel that comes from Asher, Oklahoma. It has the tones of orange in it that pick up the orange in the brick.
Yeah.
Orange brick can sometimes be hard to work with color scheme wise, and we tried to pay close attention to that by editing out some of the existing plant materials that the colors didn't quite gel with the color of the orange brick.
And I noticed you went with a pretty, a nice purple, silver, very simple color scheme, staying within the same color family.
Yeah, we thought it complemented the brick, and it's really kind of a xeric garden, Kim, in that these people aren't heavy-duty gardeners. You know, they love to garden, but they don't have a lot of time, so we needed a fairly low-maintenance recipe for this. So we came up with the xeric-type plants that won't require a lot of maintenance and fiddling with. So.
Well, I think that's an interesting point that, if you're designing for someone who maybe doesn't have as much time in the garden, you might choose different plants than if you're designing for an avid gardener.
Absolutely. Oftentimes people think they want an old-fashioned English garden for their property, but they don't realize the maintenance, the deadheading, the staking, the dividing. And so you have to sometimes think about those issues as to whether the homeowner is going to do the maintenance themselves or if they're just going to hire it done, because sometimes hiring it done can get quite costly. So you've got to weigh all those factors when you're laying out the plan.
Okay. Well, we're going to look at a couple more gardens with the rest of your design team.
Great. Thank you.
Joining me now is Roger Runge, another member of the design team. Roger, could you tell me a bit about this landscape here?
Well, this is a garden that has a lot packed into it. And it's a project that was a lot of fun because there was a lot of existing material to work with in the way of plant material, some hardscaping, and then the client really has a lot of input on this project. His sense of style and a lot of what you see in the garden is really from him. So he has become a part of the design team on his own garden.
Okay. And you were telling me a bit about the client as an interior designer, so he has a really good eye for this.
So he's got a really good eye, and when you look at parts of the garden, it really looks a whole lot like the interior of his home. So a lot of the same colors are used inside and outside, a lot of the same textures and kind of a style of accessorizing and putting focal points and stuff like that in place.
And we see a lot of very detailed pieces, and I think that that's an important point, is that you kind of stick with one style.
Right, yeah, and there's some repetition throughout the garden as far as some of the colors, both in the plant material, and you'll see a lot of blue and white, and white picked up here and there. So that really helps to kind of tie things together and give a flow to all the different spaces.
Well, this curved pathway really draws you through the garden.
Yeah, and the curve and the placement of the stepping stones really adds a sense of informality to it. If it were a straight line, it would look, harder and less inviting, I think.
Absolutely, and as you move through, different plants come into view, now we see...
Yeah, you get different viewpoints from the garden. There's stuff that you can't see from the beginning of the path, and as you progress, you see more and more, and it kind of opens up as you walk around a tree or a shrub.
Kind of draws you in as well.
It does, yeah.
Absolutely. Now, you said there were some existing plants, and you had to work around those. How do you go about doing that?
Well, of course, you analyze whether it's worth keeping or not first.
Sure.
And then a lot of times the plant material that's there will dictate your choice of other plant materials. If it's a big tree casting a lot of shade, that's going to dictate what kind of plant material you use there, or if it's a sunny spot. And then also the textures and the foliage and things like that will give you clues as to what works well with it.
Okay, and you use a lot of perennials in this garden.
It's almost all perennials, which is nice because the view changes on a weekly basis as something comes into bloom and blooms for a couple of weeks, and then something else next to it comes into bloom later on.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for walking through this garden with us. I appreciate it, Roger.
Thanks for being here.
Joining me now is Marquette Clay, co-owner of Garden Design Associates and a member of the design team. Marquette, now one of your responsibilities is working with seasonal color.
It is. When it comes around time for seasonal color, customers usually call me and I get them all scheduled, go out and find all the plant material and get it all installed.
Okay, and in this particular garden there's a lot of color.
There is a lot of color. These clients love their color. His wife actually just loves color, and their former house was red brick, so we had a limited palette that we could work with. So now that they have a light colored house and this is a new garden, that we can just kind of go wild with the color, so she can get all her primary colors that she likes.
Excellent. Well, let's look around back as well. Well, I can tell here with these big, large windows that the views were certainly important as you were designing.
It was very important that we give them a view, especially when you come in through the front door and coming to the living area. You can look through and see a lot of the garden straight to the back. So we kept everything low in here, and things will progress and things will grow as time goes on. But initially, we wanted to give them that open view with all the glass facing out to the backyard.
And there's another charming little view from the dining room.
There is. Out the dining room, there's a nice fountain that's set up over there.
Yeah, and I like that, it's the only area over there that's landscape, but it's the only space that really needs it.
It is. It's a tight little space, but it's a nice space with the fountain set up there.
You also have a lot of opens. I mean, there's the open walkway and the little lawn.
Yeah, it was just, with this being a young, mature, young garden, we thought it would be important to keep everything open now. And the clients didn't want to put a lot into it initially, so we thought we'd keep it open and give you a lot of room for growth.
Okay. Now you had mentioned it's a new landscape, and I imagine when you come into a place and you're trying to landscape, it's hard to do it all at once.
It is. There's a lot of plant material to go on, and the customers have clients have a lot of things to consider. So a lot of times we'll use fillers, and a good filler is monkey grass or lorope, green lorope. So in this garden we did use some different pockets of green lorope and also moneywort, which is an easy ground cover to transition from. It's not a big spreader, so you can easily dig it up and move it out and add in your new plant material.
Well, I think that's important for homeowners to realize you don't have to do it all at once. You can get something inexpensive and temporary and always come back later.
You can always move it out and move it somewhere else, or just discard it, and you're not out a lot of money or expense.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining me today, Marquette.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thank you for coming.
Well, I'm here again with Roger. We're in a historic neighborhood in Oklahoma City, and I really enjoy the juxtaposition of your formal and informal elements in this landscape.
Yeah, I think that's a real key to this design at this home. We've got a lot of, we've got the historic home, and it's certainly a formal presence, but it's an asymmetrical facade, so that adds a little air of informality to it. We've used some materials like the flagstone, which of course works really well with the orange color of the brick.
Absolutely.
And we've got areas where it's paved and kind of structured and formal and create, formal edges, but then it also transitions into this really nice, just kind of loose series of flagstone steps through the front lawn. A lot of things kind of play off of that formal, informal. We've got a symmetrical arrangement of pots, but the types and the eclectic mix of pots and the soft planting in them is a little more informal, whereas the symmetrical arrangement is very formal. So it kind of softens it, keeps it from being a little too stiff.
Okay, well, let's look in the backyard as well.
Well, here in the back, some of the design elements were created by Warren Edwards, landscape architect, for the clients many years ago, and then they did some remodeling and built new guest quarters over the garage, and we got involved in the project at that point. So we really worked with some of the structures that Warren had originally designed, like the design of the fence, which is kind of a signature Warren Edwards. We've repeated the design in the trellis over here. The trellis helps to separate the parking court from this nice little garden, give us a little more privacy here. And there were some issues that we had to deal with, like the two-story buildings from the neighbor's property looking into this. So screening was a real concern here. It's a real priority to give us some privacy, give us a sense of visual privacy plus real privacy from the second-story windows. We used a lot of evergreen foliage in the magnolias, and I think it's nice that there's a lot of texture going on in the screening. It's not just a solid hedge. We've got holly, juniper, magnolias. So
it's very interesting, but also serving this purpose.
Different shades of green, different textures, and it's green year-round, so it gives a nice, nice backdrop year-round, even in the winter. And then in the foreground, some of the deciduous elements like the elms give us a little more interest, so you can enjoy the change of the seasons.
Yes, absolutely. I found some other interesting aspects here in trying to create this vertical interest. You have the espaliered magnolia.
Right.
Yeah.
That was kind of a stark brick wall, and it's kind of that's typical in a lot of urban landscapes. We've got a small space, and you've got tall structures around you. So training the magnolia up the side of that gives us extends the green up to soften that brick wall and gives us a really nice look. Plus we added, a little softness in the antique wrought iron that's hanging on the wall next to it.
Yeah. Another good example, you had the vine trained up.
Right, the Akebia vine, because we had a very narrow space, just about 6 or 8 inches there between the driveway and that wall, and again, a really stark vertical brick wall, and training that vine on it gave us some interest and helps to soften the wall.
Well, thank you again for walking through the landscape with me.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks to the whole design team for having us today.
Yeah, definitely is a team effort.
Excellent.